You have paid the heavens your function, and the prisoner the very debt of your calling. Measure for measure. Jeanie Deans, for here our story unites itself with that part of the narrative which broke off at the end of the 14th chapter, while she waited, in terror and amazement, the hasty advance of 3 or 4 men towards her, was yet more startled at their suddenly breaking asunder, and giving chase in different directions to the late object of her terror, who became at that moment, though she could not well assign a reasonable cause, rather the cause of her interest. One of the party, it was Sharpitlaw, came straight up to her, and saying, "Your name is Jeanie Deans, and you are my prisoner," immediately added, "But if you will tell me which way he ran I will let you go." "I dinna ken, sir," was all the poor girl could utter, and, indeed, it is the phrase which rises most readily to the lips of any person in her rank, as the readiest reply to any embarrassing question. "But," said Sharpitlaw, "ye ken wha it was ye were speaking why, my leddy, on the hillside, and midnight is sae near, ye surely ken that, my bonny woman?" "I dinna ken, sir," again iterated Jeanie, who really did not comprehend in her terror the nature of the questions which were so hastily put to her in this moment of surprise. "We will try to mend your memory by and by, Hinny," said Sharpitlaw, and shouted, as we have already told the reader, to Ratcliffe, to come up and take charge of her, while he himself directed the chase after Robertson, which he still hoped might be successful. As Ratcliffe approached, Sharpitlaw pushed the young woman towards him with some rudeness, and betaking himself to the more important object of his quest, began to scale crags and scramble up steep banks, with an agility of which his profession and his general gravity of demeanor would previously have argued him incapable. In a few minutes there was no one within sight, and only a distant halloo from one of the pursuers to the other, faintly heard on the side of the hill, argued that there was anyone within hearing. Jeanie Deans was left in the clear moonlight, standing under the guard of a person of whom she knew nothing, and, what was worse, concerning whom, as the reader is well aware, she could have learned nothing that would not have increased her terror. When all in the distance was silent, Ratcliffe for the first time addressed her, and it was in that cold sarcastic indifferent tone familiar to habitual depravity, whose crimes are instigated by custom rather than by passion. "This is a braw night for ye, dearie," he said, attempting to pass his arm across her shoulder, "to be on the green hill wi' your Joe." Jeanie extricated herself from his grasp, but did not make any reply. "I think lads and lasses," continued the ruffian, "dinna meet at Mushet's cairn at midnight to crack nuts," and he again attempted to take hold of her. "If ye are an officer of justice, sir," said Jeanie, again eluding his attempt to seize her, "ye deserve to have your coat stripped from your back." "Very true, Hinny," said he, succeeding forcibly in his attempt to get hold of her, "but suppose I should strip your cloak off first?" "Ye are more a man, I am sure, than to hurt me, sir," said Jeanie, "for God's sake have pity on a half-distracted creature." "Come, come," said Ratcliffe, "you're a good-looking wench, and should not be cross-grained. I was going to be an honest man, but the devil has this very day flung first a lawyer, and then a woman, in my gate. I'll tell you what, Jeanie, they are out on the hillside. If you'll be guided by me, I'll carry you to a wee bit corner in the pleasance, that I ken o' in an old wife's, that the procutors o' Scotland wad naething o', and we'll send Robertson word to meet us in Yorkshire, for there is a set o' braw lads about the Midland counties, that I hae doon business wi' before now, and as he will leave Mr. Sharpitlaw to whistle on his thumb." It was fortunate for Jeanie, in an emergency like the present, that she possessed presence of mind and courage, so soon as the first hurry of surprise had enabled her to rally her recollection. She saw the risk she was in from a ruffian, who not only was such by profession, but had that evening been stupefying, by means of strong liquors, the internal aversion which he felt at the business on which Sharpitlaw had resolved to employ him. "Dinna speak a sae loud," said she, in a low voice, "he's up yonder." "Who, Robertson?" said Ratcliffe, eagerly. "Aye," replied Jeanie, "up yonder," and she pointed to the ruins of the hermitage and chapel. "By G.D., then," said Ratcliffe, "I'll make my een of him, either one way or other. Wait for me here." But no sooner had he set off as fast as he could run, towards the chapel, than Jeanie started in an opposite direction, over high and low, on the nearest path homeward. Her juvenile exercise as a herdswoman had put life and mettle in her heels, and never had she followed Dustyfoot, when the cows were in the corn, with half so much speed as she now cleared the distance betwixt Muschet's cairn and her father's cottage at St. Leonard's. To lift the latch, to enter, to shut, bolt, and double bolt the door, to draw against it a heavy article of furniture, which she could not have moved in a moment of less energy, so as to make yet farther provision against violence, was almost the work of a moment, yet done with such silence as equalled the celerity. Her next anxiety was upon her father's account, and she drew silently to the door of his apartment, in order to satisfy herself whether he had been disturbed by her return. He was awake, probably had slept but little, but the constant presence of his own sorrows, the distance of his apartment from the outer door of the house, and the precautions which Jeanie had taken to conceal her departure and return, had prevented him from being sensible of either. He was engaged in his devotions, and Jeanie could distinctly hear him use these words, "And for the other child thou hast given me to be a comfort and stay to my old age, may her days be long in the land, according to the promise thou hast given to those who shall honor father and mother, may all her purchased and promised blessings be multiplied upon her, keep her in the watches of the night, and in the uprising of the morning, that all in this land may know that thou hast not utterly hid thy face from those that seek thee in truth and in sincerity." He was silent, but probably continued his petition in the strong fervency of mental devotion. His daughter retired to her apartment, comforted, that while she was exposed to danger, her head had been covered by the prayers of the Justas by an helmet, and under the strong confidence, that while she walked worthy of the protection of heaven, she would experience its countenance. It was in that moment that a vague idea first darted across her mind, that something might yet be achieved for her sister's safety, conscious as she now was of her innocence of the unnatural murder with which she stood charged. It came, as she described it, on her mind, like a sunblink on a stormy sea, and although it instantly vanished, yet she felt a degree of composure which she had not experienced for many days, and could not help being strongly persuaded that, by some means or other, she would be called upon, and directed, to work out her sister's deliverance. She went to bed, not forgetting her usual devotions, the more fervently made on account of her late deliverance, and she slept soundly in spite of her agitation. We must return to Ratcliffe, who had started, like a greyhound from the slips when the sportsman cries halloo, as soon as Jeanie had pointed to the ruins. Whether he meant to aid Robertson's escape, or to assist his pursuers, may be very doubtful. Perhaps he did not himself know, but had resolved to be guided by circumstances. He had no opportunity, however, of doing either, for he had no sooner surmounted the steep ascent, and entered under the broken arches of the Rains, than a pistol was presented at his head, and a harsh voice commanded him, in the king's name, to surrender himself prisoner. "Mr. Sharpedlaw," said Ratcliffe, surprised, "is this your honor?" "Is it only you, and B.D. to you?" answered the fiscal, still more disappointed. "What made you leave the woman?" "She told me she saw Robertson go into the ruins, so I made what haste I could to cleek the collant." "It's all over now," said Sharpedlaw. "We shall see no more of him tonight, but he shall hide himself in a beanhole, if he remains on Scottish ground without my finding him. Call back the people, Ratcliffe." Ratcliffe hallooed to the dispersed officers, who willingly obeyed the signal, for probably there was no individual among them who would have been much desirous of a rencontre, hand to hand, and at a distance from his comrades, with such an active and desperate fellow as Robertson. "And where are the two women?" said Sharpedlaw. "Both made their heels serve them, I suspect," replied Ratcliffe, and he hummed the end of the old song.